South African citizens are urged to behave responsibly ahead of the Easter holidays. This message is coming from experts across all sectors of society. Among those ringing alarm bells is a Solidarity Fund, which is calling for a renewed sense of solidarity and collective efficacy to South Africans. Business sectors like religious groups, liquor, restaurants, transport and the hospitality industries have also been urged to be active players in preventing the next wave. Executive Head of the Humanitarian Support and Brand Communication Solidarity Fund, Wendy Tlo, joins us now live. Wendy, a very good evening. Thank you so much for speaking to us. It's been about a year, I think, since the Solidarity Fund was set up. Take us through some of the successes you've enjoyed.
There's a number of successes. Firstly, that we were actually established as a Solidarity Fund, and that we received up to date about 3.22 billion rand in donations, which have been pledged and which we have received. Secondly, I think it's been focusing on the strategy and the mandate of the Solidarity Fund, working really in three focus areas: the health pillar, the humanitarian pillar, and the communications and behavior change pillars. In the health pillar, we've managed to do a lot of projects that have been really about being additive to the national health effort, ranging from procurement and supplying of PPE to health workers, particularly in the public sector, and with a focus on community health workers. We have participated in the local manufacture of CPAP ventilators, which have been distributed to hospitals across some of the hotspot provinces. We have provided essential equipment as well, and we have also aided in increasing capacity of testing, especially at the time of the hard lockdown as we were facing our first wave of the pandemic. On the humanitarian front, we focused on two areas. They are food relief, where we've done 3 projects. One was at the very beginning of the hard lockdown, food parcel distribution in partnership with the Department of Social Development and other community-based organizations. We followed that up later in the year with a food voucher program of approximately 100 million, and that really went to vulnerable communities that were impacted by unemployment as a result of the pandemic. And lastly, we had another 100 million rand project, which was really aimed at rural areas in the form of farming input vouchers of 2,000 rand each. The second area was gender-based violence. We've done 2 projects, actually in the process of the second one. One was really supporting through PPE, critical medical services, as well as safe transport for national organizations that were assisting women and children who were affected by gender-based violence, especially at the time of the hard lockdown, when they were locked down with their perpetrators and couldn't access assistance. And the second one, which we're currently running, has been a call to organizations, community-based organizations, and larger non-profit organizations who work in the GBV value chain. And that's really in prevention, in emergency response, as well as access to the justice system. We did a call for applications for them to apply for grant funding. We have now finalized those 332 organizations that will be receiving funding, ranging between 50,000 to 250,000 for community-based organizations, and then 250,000 to 1 million rand for the larger non-profit organizations. We're in the process of contracting with those identified and selected organizations with the intent that we should be dispersing to them in the next couple of weeks or so. In terms of the comms and the behavior change pillar of the fund, it's really been about being additive to the call for all of us as South Africans to adhere to these new behaviors in this new world that we're existing in, to make sure that we keep ourselves safe, but also to keep members of our communities and our families safe, and really to give us the agency, I think, to call out those people who are deliberately not adhering to the behaviors, and making sure that we are part of the national collective and the national voice and the message that keeps on reminding South Africans and reinforcing these behaviors, because they really are a very good armor for us as we prepare for the national vaccine rollout.
Now, advocacy is a big part of the work that you do, and I know that you were heavily involved in the Return to Work initiative. So I'd like to think that there are a number of other advocacy programs that you're carrying out. Obviously, what's top of mind is Easter is coming up and the potential third wave. What have you been doing in that space?
We've been, so we are part of a national communications partnership that is chaired by the GCIS. And the advantage of that is that it has members from all strata of society. So we have civil society organizations, we have social partners, we have business, we have government, and we have the Solidarity Fund represented within that structure. It is really the central machine, if I can call it, for planning and responding to communication and advocacy needs of the country when it comes to ensuring that we are sending out the correct messages, using the right and credible voices to send out those messages, but also being very visible across all platforms to as many people in South Africa as possible. And some of the things that the Solidarity Fund in particular has been doing, firstly through that National Communication Partnership, is support to community networks that have very good networks on the ground in communities. So we are about to give them support in terms of continuing that work, and in terms of scaling up that work and reach of that work to make sure that we can be present in as many communities, no matter how far they are from urban centers, to the message, firstly about Easter, but also about building, I think, a positive momentum around vaccine education and knowledge. Secondly, we are planning a webinar for next week, Tuesday, and that webinar is really a multi-stakeholder webinar where we are having a conversation about how do we come together and collaborate and partner to try and stop this third wave, or this imminent third wave that everybody is talking about. And those sectors, as you mentioned earlier, is the religious sector, the liquor sector, transport, hospitality, and tourism, because these are the sectors that are most affected as we go into the Easter period, which is largely about gatherings, religious gatherings, which is largely about family gatherings, but also it is about domestic travel. So we're really coming together to say, what are the main issues that each of those sectors must now make sure that they place more emphasis on, and making sure that they themselves adhere to the regulations of the alert level 1 that we're at the moment, to ensure that we don't create super spreader events that could then precipitate a third wave. And then
Sorry,
thirdly,
Wendy, if I could just come in there before you respond, which unfortunately has to be my final question. You're having this webinar 3 days before Easter commences, and I'd like to think that the Easter juggernaut is already in motion. Is this not in many ways a little late?
No, I don't think so. We started essentially with the Easter messaging campaign about 10 days ago, using print media. We are on social media. We are also on radio through live reads. I think this webinar really should be seen in the context of the last push, to remind South Africans, to reinforce the message, but also to have the stakeholders that are likely to be most active in this particular period to recommit themselves to the public, to themselves, and to collaborate to make sure that we can, as much as possible, get the message out that when we are out, we should be wearing our masks properly, that we should avoid these large gatherings which could precipitate super spreader events, that we should ventilate and open windows, especially when we're using public transport, and lastly, to make sure that we social distance. So it's really the last-ditch effort for us to, as a collaborative congregation of stakeholders, to make sure that we remind and reinforce these behaviors a few days before Easter.
Wendy Tlo, thank you kindly for speaking to us, Executive Head, Humanitarian Support and Brand Communication of the Solidarity Fund.